Hi, I'm Mark. I'm like 50% of the designer duo behind Tycoon the board game, and I now will give you a very detailed look into the rules of these games. I will be as precise as possible and will try to include everything I can imagine. Of course, maybe there will be some very specific cases where you need to go back to the rulebook, but besides this, I think if watching this video, you will have all the rules needed to play your first game. What we also recommend that you have the rulebook always close to you when you play it the first time, because especially on the back you have a very good overview over the whole game. But now let's start with the rule explanation. So let's start with the game setup. So this is a setup for 4 players. The first thing you do, place the scoring board and the sous market in the middle of your table. Below the sous market, you place the sous market sheet. You place it like this, so that at every cutout, a sequence of characters is visible. The starting position you can choose randomly. Then all the players take their playing materials. So all the stuff in your color. So we have, for example, we have worker meeples, and we have cubes in your color. Then all players get 2 overview cards and 21 animal cards. Then place 1 cube you place on the 6 of the tiles track, and 1 cube you place on the 10 of the money track, and you place 2 cubes of your color on the running cost fields on the zeros of your staff board, and you place 1 worker, also the first worker, on your staff board. And this is done by all the players. Then, in addition, you also place a cube on all the zeros here on the scoring board, and here on the popularity track you also place your small triangle. The next thing that is done is that we set up here all the additional animals. These are the animals that are made out of cardboard. Then here in the animal grip you place all the wooden meeples. Then here we have the fabric bag that contains all the offspring cubes, so the light blue and pink offspring cubes. Here we have the 6 offspring dice and the panda animal card. And then here in the middle you place the enclosure tiles. We have boreal, we have jungle or rainforest, and we have here savanna. You also place here all the focal points, focal buildings, so the buildings that you have in 4 colors. So we have brown, blue, green and yellow. And here you place all the buildings. And then what you have to do is place here on the scoring board, you place the event cards. Below it you place the donor cards. 1 donor card faces up. And then you place on summer, on the here on the field summer, you place the season marker, and here you place the round tracker on the first round S. And then you give the starting player marker to the first player, and this is the setup. To the objective of the game. So the objective of the game is that you have to find the right balance between popularity and conservation. So the lower of these 2 tracks in the end will be your victory points. So it's all about keeping this balance always in mind when you play this game. The whole game is structured in 8 rounds. So you have a starting round, you have 6 normal rounds, and you have an end round. The end round and the starting round, which are a bit special, we will mention later in this video. All these rounds, or year, how you also could call them, have like 4 phases. There is spring, there it's all about offspring. Then we have summer. Here it's all about giving away or taking animals on the zoo market. Then in autumn it's all about building your zoo and developing your zoo. And then in winter it's all about accounting. So here we have a look if you make a profit and how much this profit will be. A look at the animal cards, which are for me the most important component in the whole game. So here we have an Asian elephant, here we have a red and green macaque, and here we have an elk. So first let us have a look at the numbers on the left. These are the levels. So here we have a level 1 species, this is a level 2 species, the golden lion tamarin is a level 3 species, and all additional animals are level 0 species. This number or this level shows you where you can find this species on the zoo market. Then we have the name of the species, and in their background you see a specific color. Here, for example, green. This indicates that these are rainforest species. Here with blue, it shows that this is a boreal species, and here with the black rhino with orange-brown, it shows that this is a savanna species. Then here on the experience track, which I will explain in a second, you can see some paw prints. These paw prints show you to which order this species belongs. So for example, here we have ungulates, here we have birds, then we have primates here, and then we also have carnivora. So now let us have a look on the left column here. So in the top you see popularity. Each species has a different popularity, and of all the species the elephant is the most popular one. So when you add a first time the elephant to your zoo, please add 7 popularity directly to your popularity track, or 2 popularity to your popularity track when you add the red and green macaque. Some species work a little bit special when it comes to popularity, for example the American black bear or the tiger or the snow leopard. When you add the first American black bear to your zoo, then you get 3 popularity points. When you add the second one to your zoo, you can increase your popularity by 1 to 4. So then you get you have a total of 4 popularity thanks to the American black bear. With the snow leopard, it would be from 3 to 5. So below you can see the education, which is also different from species to species. It's important to know that education isn't added automatically to your education track when you place this species into your zoo. You have to build focal points, which then allow you to add the points included in the enclosure to your education track. So for example, when you build, for example this enclosure here, when you build 1 focal point, you can add all the education in this specific enclosure to your education track. So this would be 3 from the red and green macaque and 1 from the jabiru. So a total of 4 education to your education track. Then we have conservation. Not all species have conservation, but the elephant has. So this works a little bit like education, but a tiny bit different. So you also, the conservation isn't directly added to your conservation track when you add the species, but you also have to build focal points. But here it's not 1, and then you get the entire for conservation, like with education. Here you have to build for each conservation point that you want to get on your conservation track, you have to build 1 focal point. Then here we have additional requirements. The elephant has them, the red and green macaque and the elk don't. So what are these? So that you can get elephants from the zoo market, you need to have at least 3 ungulates. Others, for example, need 2 birds or 2 apes. But here it's 3 ungulates. It's very important that additional animals are also counted in when you count all your ungulates that you have in a zoo. And on top, the elephant also has another additional requirement, and this is 15 popularity. So you need to have 15 popularity or higher, and it's important that it's popularity and not buzz. And when you have 15 popularity, then from then on you can take elephants from the zoo market. Here on the left, you see the National Park Corporation. So these logos show to which National Park Corporation, which work a little bit like set collection, this species belongs. You can find all these National Park Corporation in the bottom row of the zoo market. Then here, these numbers show how many animal meeples you can place on an enclosure tile. So elephants always need an enclosure tile for their own. So for 3 elephants, I need, of course, 3 enclosure tiles. And here with the red and green macaque, you can always place them in pairs. So this is a little bit more space efficient. And here with the elk, you can place 3 elks on 1 enclosure tile. Then we have here the running costs. They are calculated like this. So for every occupied enclosure tile, which is occupied by this species, you have to multiply this number. So for example, if we have 3 elephants, it's 3 times 3 equals 9. So we have running costs from 9. Then here we have 1 occupied enclosure tile, and this results in costs of 2. Then we have also 2 running costs from the Jabiru. So we have 4 here, 9 here, 13 in total. And then we have 1 running costs here from the elk, and this results in a total of 14 running costs. Then here we have the social behavior of the males. So here we have an alpha male. This means only 1 male per enclosure. Then here we have flexible males. This means you can have any group composition in your enclosure. This means only males, only females, or any mix from it. And then here we have beta or bachelor animals. They work a little bit like alpha males. So when there are female present in this enclosure, then it's only allowed to have 1 male in this enclosure. But if there are no female presence, then with beta animals, it's possible to form bachelor groups, so male-only enclosures. Here, at the bottom, this is the tolerance to additional species. So some species are tolerant to additional species and some are not. The elephant doesn't allow additional animals in its enclosure. The red and green macaque and the elk do. So this is possible that you can build a mixed enclosures with Jabirus and red and green macaques. And it's important that this has a good advantage, because if you do this and you build a mixed enclosure, then you can get 1 additional popularity point. So this enclosure then has a total of 4 popularity, 2 from the macaque, 1 from the Jabiru, and 1 because it's a mixed enclosure. And then we have a look here at the animal happiness. The animal happiness consists out of 4 needs. We have experience, we have free space, we have retreats, and we have group size. So first, let us have a look at the experience. The experience works like this, that it rises over time. So at the beginning, you start at the very bottom, and then every winter you increase your experience by 1. There is one exception. If this is, for example, not your first ungulate in your zoo, then you can start at the level 2 at the brown paw print. So, for example, if I already have a bird and then I add the macaque to my zoo, then I can start at position number 2. It's important that also additional animals count into this. So if I would have had the Jabiru in the beginning of this round, and then I would add the macaque to my zoo, I could already start at position number 2. Then here we have the free space. Free space means all non-occupied enclosure tiles. Occupied means that there is an animal or an animal meeple or an additional animal on it. So here you see we have 2 free enclosure tiles. So the minimum requirement would be fulfilled because the elephant needs at least 2 free space. It's very important that when you add a species to your zoo, you always have to fulfill all minimum requirements. It's not possible that one of these are below the minimum standards. So it's always important to keep this in mind. Then we have the retreats. Retreats means the number of these brown shelter pieces. So the elephant needs 2, and here we also have 2 in the back. So that's great. So we also fulfilled this. And then this is the group size. So this means how many animal meeples are there in the enclosure. And the elephant at least needs 3. So wonderful. We also fulfilled this. So we are allowed to place the elephant in our zoo. It's important that if this group size has a plus here, this means that you can add as many animals to this enclosure as you want. Some animals, for example, as the tiger, which is a loner, it's only allowed to have a maximum of 2 tigers. So here you can't increase the number over 2. Then here on the side, you see little yellow houses depicted. These yellow houses show you that it's allowed to build yellow focal points into this enclosure. And for every group size that you unlock, you get more houses sometimes. So in this case, if we have 3 elephants, we can build 1 yellow focal point. If we would have 4, and we are allowed to build up to 2 yellow focal points. And if we have 5 or more elephants, we are allowed to build 3 yellow focal points. And with the red and green Markov, if you have 5 or more, then you could build 1 yellow focal point. And with the elk, it's even the case, if you have 9 of them or more, you can build 2 yellow focal points. Then let us have a look at the offspring. So here it's important that you first look at this circle. This shows you how many dice you can roll. With the elephant you can roll per female that is present in the enclosure. With birds it's always the case that you have to roll per pair. So you need a couple of birds, like a male and a female, and per male and female that you have, you can roll 1 dice. There is one exception, and that's the golden lion tamarine. So in this case you always roll 1 die. It doesn't matter how many you have of them, how many females or males, always 1 die per enclosure. And then here on the side you see how the animal happiness influences the chance for offspring. So the happier an animal is, the higher the chance that you have a successful die roll. So here, if the elephant has a yellow happiness, what does it mean that it has a yellow happiness? It means that at least 1 of these cubes is in the yellow area. So always the lowest cube is decisive. For example, here the animal happiness would be yellow, so it's not allowed to roll a dice. Same here with the red and green Markov. Here with the elk you could already roll, and with a 5 or 6, so a 5 or higher, you would hit an offspring. And with the elephant and the red and green Markov, you need at least light green. And then here on the side, you see the litter size. So in case you have a successful roll, then how many offspring cubes you can draw from the fabric bag. So in the case of an elephant, you can draw 1. In the case of the red and green Markov, 2. So the offspring cubes, they can be pink or blue. So this means they are either a male or female, and you then place them directly into your enclosures. And here on the side, this is the mother track. Always when for every, so some animals have these, some don't. And always when you hit a dice, then you have to place a cube here for every dice that you hit. So this symbolizes the mothers that have at the moment a baby and that can't have more babies for the moment. And yeah, that's all about the animal cards. Let's talk about the actual gameplay. Every round in Zoo Tycoon the board game starts with spring. There is one exception, and that's the starting round S, where you skip spring entirely and go directly to summer. But in all the other rounds, you start with spring. The first thing you do is you change the starting player. So you give the starting player marker counterclockwise or clockwise to the next player. The second thing you do is you draw an event card. There are 2 types of event cards. There are breaking news, which you place on top of the event card pile and activate, of course. And there are news event cards. News event cards affect, for example, the animal market, but also the offspring. So since they are very much animal related, it's best and recommended to place it on the news field here on the zoo market, so you don't forget about them. And now let's have a look at offspring. So after choosing the next starting player and drawing an event card, we now start with the offspring phase. This phase is done by all players simultaneously. This means all players do this at the exact same time. The first thing players do is they check their animal cards, especially the one with a mother track. They check if there are cubes on the mother track. If there are cubes on the mother track, these cubes are shifted up by 1. Cubes on the mother track symbolize females that had offspring in the last round and are not yet ready to have more offspring. As soon as a cube falls down or steps over the mother track, you can remove it, and now this means that 1 more female in your enclosure can have offspring. So once this is done, and in our case there are no cubes on the mother track, all female can have offspring. It's important that with lions you roll the dice per female. So in our case we have 5 female lions, so we can roll with 5 dice. If this would be a bird species, then we would only be allowed to roll 1 dice, because birds are, you always get a die per pair or couple, and in this case we only have 1 couple. So 1 dice if this would be a bird. Now it's a lion, so we are allowed to use 5 dice. So all players can now have a look at their animal cards and have to evaluate if this species requires 4 offsprings, because there are 3 requirements that has to be fulfilled before you can roll the dice. So the first thing, there needs to be a male and a female present in this enclosure. This is the case. We have here a darker colored meeple, that's a male, and we have 5 females. The second thing that you have to check is the animal happiness. Does your animal happiness allow you to roll the dice? We have a light green happiness here with the lions, so this allows us to roll the dice. If we have a 6 or higher, this gives us an offspring. And then the last requirement is, are there females present in your enclosure that are not at the moment on your mother track? In our case, we have no females on the mother track, so we can roll with all 5. Let's say there would be 3 cubes here on the mother track, then we could only roll with 2 dice, because 3 females would at the moment not be ready to have more offspring. But in our case, all these requirements are fulfilled, so we can roll the dice. So let us have a look if we are lucky. So in our case, yes, great, we have offspring because we had to roll a 6. So players that score a successful die roll, they now draw from the fabric bag with the offspring cube the litter size. So with lions, this is 2. So we draw 2 offspring cubes. So let's have a look what our offspring cubes look like. Oh, it's a male and a female. And these offspring cubes you now can place into your enclosure. It doesn't matter where, just place them in your enclosure for the moment. And now after this is done, we place 1 mother cube on the mother track, because 1 female had offspring and we lions have a mother track. So we place a cube there. So this female now for 1 more round can't have offspring. And now the last thing that we do is we score buzz. So what exactly is buzz? And buzz is caused, for example, by offspring. So you have a look at all your animals and you check which have offspring and which don't. Of all the animals that have offspring, you take the one with the highest popularity. So for example, with lions, this is 5. So at the moment we have 5 popularity, which we added to the popularity track once we added the lions. And now we can have this 5 popularity as buzz on top of your base popularity. So in our case, we have a base popularity of 5, and on top we add the 5 buzz, because this is our most popular species that has offspring. We will talk more about buzz in a later moment in this video, but for the moment, just keep this in mind as it is. And now some words about the offspring cubes. It's very important that offspring cubes, they don't count to the group size, and they also don't cause costs, and they also don't take away free space. So these you can completely ignore. So what can you do with these offspring cubes? You can do exactly 2 things during the game. The first thing that you can do, you can transform them in spring at any time, in summer and in autumn at any time. You can convert them in animal meeples. So it's important that you still respect the rules. So for female lions, this would be possible. So this female I could turn in any moment, I can turn it into an adult female. But males, I can't turn into an adult male, because there is only 1 male allowed in this enclosure. So this is the first thing you can do. You can transform offspring into animal meeples. The second thing that you can do, and of course it's very important that when you do this, then they count to the group size, they also affect the free space, and they also can affect the cost. So the second thing that you can do with your offspring cube is give them away or in summer on the zoo market. So this, please keep this in mind. We will talk about this in a second. So let us for a second talk about staff actions, because in spring, that's the first moment in the round where you can perform staff actions. So there are staff actions for spring, for summer and autumn. We will talk about the ones in summer and autumn a bit later, but now we talk about staff actions in general and the 2 spring actions. So first, how do these workers work? So every zoo in the beginning has 1 free worker that is here all the time for you and that can perform actions for you. It's important that every worker that you have can perform exactly 1 staff action per year. So for example, if I would perform birth control in spring, this worker is then done for the whole year. So how can I perform more staff actions? I have to activate more of my workers. And every worker that you activate causes running costs of 3. So if I add another worker to my staff board, I have to add 3 running costs to my 9 running costs. So I would have a total of 12. And if I would add another one, I would have a total of 15. So and it's important to know, as long as these additional workers have not yet performed a staff action in your year, you can put them again back into stock and reduce the cost by 3. So back to 9. So now to the spring actions. So let us assume that we would want to perform breeding. What does breeding mean? Breeding means that if you roll, for example, if we would have rolled 5 dice for the lions and we would have 5 times an unsuccessful dice roll, we could re-roll 1 single dice. So, and it's very important that you can only roll unsuccessful dice and not re-roll a successful dice. So with this action, if we put here our worker, we can re-roll 1 dice. And it's important, you can do, like most actions, you can redo this action, so you can do it several times with several workers, but not per species. So if I would put here a second worker, I can roll with this worker, for example, re-roll for gorillas, but I can't re-roll again for lions. You can have only 1 re-roll per species. The second action is birth control. So you could activate for 1 species birth control. What does this mean? So I could take any number of these adult lions and put them on the side. So I lay them on the side. So for example, I could lay down my male lion. So this means that no longer he does affect the offspring in this enclosure. So no offspring, so I don't have to roll any dice in the next rounds, as long as he stays like this. Or I could also turn down like 3 females, and then in the next round I only have to roll dice for 2 females. So this is totally up to you, and it's very important that at any moment in the game you can put them again in an upright position, and then they are totally normal again and you can roll dice for them and everything is back to normal. So yeah, these are the staff actions in spring. Offspring influences 2 nature conservation projects. So let us have a look at these 2 particular projects. First, we have a look at the Worldwide Conservation Breeding Program. How does the Worldwide Conservation Breeding Program work? Every time when a player for the first time has offspring of a level 1 or a level 2 species, they can add 1 if it's a level 1 species or 2 if it's a level 2 species to their Worldwide Conservation Breeding Program track. So for example, let us assume for the first time I would have offspring with the raccoons. Then I could add 1 to this track. If I would have again in the next round offspring with the raccoons, nothing changes. But if I now would have elk and Bengal tiger offspring, I could add 3 more points to my track, because 1 for the elk and 2 for the Bengal tiger. In the end of the game, the player with the highest value gets 8 points. So then they would mark this with a cube. and the second highest would get 4 points. It's important that if two players have the exact same value here on the track, they both are scored first and there will be no second. This is true for most projects here. So now we have a look at the second conservation program in Spring that is affected by Offspring, and these are the reintroductions. As you may have noticed, the worldwide breeding program is only affected by level 2 and 1 species, and level 3 species, they work a little bit different, because if you have offspring with these kind of species, you don't draw offspring cubes from the offspring bag. You can, of course, but if you want to perform reintroduction, then you don't have to draw offspring cubes. But what you do is the following. So let us, for example, assume I have offspring with the northern bald ibis. The northern bald ibis has a litter size of 2. So always when I have a hit with my dice, when I roll them for the northern bald ibis, I can place 2 cubes here in the upper row. For example, if I do it for the Bornean orangutan, I only place 1 here because the litter size is 1. And now always when this top row is filled at the moment, like at any spring, then all cubes are taken away and I can place one of my cubes in the lower track. And this now means that a reintroduction was performed and that I now get the points that are here depicted. So I would get 3 points for this reintroduction. And now we can fill again the upper row. It's very important that if several players take part of such a reintroduction, for example, there would also red take place here, then we split the points. So if 2 players together perform such a reintroduction, then again all the cubes are taken away. We place one of the cubes back in the lower track, doesn't matter which color we take, but both players now get the points divided by 2. So in this case is 3 divided by 2, that would be 1.5. So we round up, both players get 2 conservation points, which they then can add to their conservation track. It's also important to know that once all these reintroductions have been performed, it's no longer possible to perform reintroductions. So at this moment now, this species works like a totally normal species, and you have to again draw offspring from the offspring bag. Also, it's very important that per round it is only possible to perform 1 reintroduction with 1 species. So let us assume I have with 2 pairs or with 2 couples of northern bald ibis, I have offspring. So in this case it's completely filled here. And then I directly can of course take the 3 conservation points. But if in the same round red also would have had offspring with the northern bald ibis, but this player comes after me in the turn, so for example I'm the starting player, there is no longer space for this offspring. So this offspring has to be drawn from the offspring bag and has to be included in the enclosure. So this is the normal offspring and can't be used anymore for reintroductions. And yeah, that's all you need to know about reintroductions. And now let us go to summer. So let us talk about summer. So in summer, it's all about the zoo market. As in the game setup, so now the zoo market is placed on the zoo market sheet, and in every cutout you see a sequence of characters. So in this summer phase, it's all about taking animals and giving away animals. It's important that every player in this phase has 2 transactions, 2 free transactions on the zoo market. So you can, for example, give away 2 species, you can take 2 species, or you can give away 1 and take 1. It's also important that on the zoo market, it's not about money. So it's never money is paid for an animal species, but you can just take it if you fulfill the requirements for them or give them away. But there is no money exchange. That is very important. And it's also important that in summer, we only talk about the species 1 to 3, so level 1 to 3. Additional animals which have no supply or demand, they are always in supply, so there is an indefinite supply of them. And these are taken in autumn. We only talk about these 22 species here. And so what do you see exactly here in the cutouts? Here you can see if a species is in demand or supply. So if there is a supply, then you see here everything is green. So for example, in this case, the Bengal tiger, we have a green male and a green female. This means we can take a male and a female. For example, here with the elephant, everything is red, so we can only give away this species. Sometimes it's half-half, so sometimes females, for example, are in demand and males are in supply. So this all works the same. And it's also important that if you see something green and it has a green rectangle around it, this means for players that don't know the game, this is an indicator that you can start, that the group size that you can get here is large enough that you can start with this species. So the minimum group size is reached. This means the green rectangle. It's also important that in this phase you can perform staff actions. There are exactly 2 staff actions that you can perform. One staff action is that you can perform one more trade on the zoo market. So if you do this, you can perform one more trade, and for each worker you place here, you can do one more trade. So at maximum you can perform 5 such trades, because you have 2 free ones plus 3 potential ones with workers. The second one that you can do is high demand. So it's possible to double demand on the zoo market. For example, if you have a lot of offspring and want to give away a lot. And the last thing that is important that I already want to mention before we go in the sub phases is unexpected arrival. So one time in the game, a player can decide that he wants to take something from a species that is in supply, but now another player has already taken this supply. So for example, if I want a snow leopard very badly, and here is a male and a female one, and for example some of my other players already took it, then I can place here my cube, and now I can also take from this supply. But I can already do this once in the whole game, so use this wisely. And so now let's start with the first sub phase, and this is renew the market. So what are you exactly what do you do in this phase? This is quite a fast phase. So as I said, you start at a random starting position, and now the first thing that you do is you just shift the market by 1 position. So you can do this totally randomly, or you can choose a path in the very beginning. The only thing that is important is that you never visit the same sequence twice. So let's just go 1 down like this, and then we already renew the market. And now let's go to the leaving phase. So let's talk about the leaving phase of summer. How does this phase work? So in this phase we give away animals, and this is done in turns. So I give away a specific certain number of animals from a species, then another player does this, then another player, then maybe I do this with a second species, and we do this as long as nobody wants to give anything away anymore, or as long as we have no more trades. Because as mentioned before, all players only have 2 trades in the entire summer phase. So if I do not have more trades, then I need to use the worker, because with workers I can of course increase my number. But you also of course have to keep in mind, if you give 2 animals away, from 2 species you give something away, then you have no available trades anymore in the arrival phase. It's also important that when I give something away, I place it on the zoo market, on the corresponding field. It doesn't matter if offspring cubes or animal meats, you place it on the corresponding fields, because these animals and offspring can then be taken in the arrival phase by other players. And of course, you can only give something away if there is a corresponding demand on the zoo market. So it needs to be red, and it needs to be in the corresponding height. So if I want to give, for example, away 4 capuchins, And then, of course, I need to have a corresponding demand, and this would be the case here. So the demand is for 2 males and 2 females. So what exactly can I do in this phase, or what exactly can I give away? So there are 4 things to consider what you can do. So I can give away species that are in the entry quarantine. So what is the entry quarantine? So here you have 2 places for 2 species, and these are used in the arrival phase. So when you take something in the arrival phase, you can place it directly in the zoo, of course, if you have an empty enclosure or like a matching enclosure, or you place it here in the entry quarantine. So if for example, I do not longer want this snow leopard and there is a demand for male snow leopards, I can give it away. What I can also do is give away offspring cubes. So for example, if there is a demand for a female rhinoceros, I can give it away. So it's also important to keep in mind that all offspring cubes that are here and like in your zoo in the end of the game count as -1 popularity point. So what can I also do? I can shift animals from the entry quarantine to the exit quarantine. Important, that doesn't count as a trade. You can do that every time, like exactly in this leaving phase. And why should you do that? You should maybe do that because then you have a free arrival space, like an entry quarantine space for the arrival phase, of course. And if you already have something in your exit quarantine, then you can also give it away. So if there, for example, would now be a demand for male red pandas, I could give them now away. I could give it now away. And it's important to know. So to summarize, you can give away offspring cubes. You can give away animals in the entry quarantine. You can shift animals from the entry quarantine to the exit quarantine. You can give away animals that are in the exit quarantine. And what can't you give away are all species, like all animal meeples that are in your zoo. So the offspring is of course an exception, but all animal meeples that once have entered your zoo, you can't give away. And also a last thing to keep in mind, and besides the offspring cubes, we give you a minus point in the end. Also, all animals that are in the exit quarantine also result in 1 minus popularity point in the end. And that's how the leaving phase works. So let's talk about the arrival phase of summer. So how is the arrival phase performed? It's done by means of snake draft. This means the first player takes something from the zoo market, then the second player, and then the third player. The third player then again can take something from the zoo market, then again the second player, then the first player, and then the first player again. And this back and forth is performed as long until all players do not want to take something from the zoo market anymore, or they can no longer take something from the zoo market. For example, because they have no more space available, or they have no more zoo market trades available, so they can take stuff from the zoo market. Because you have to keep in mind, you only have in summer 2 free trades on the zoo market. So, what are the conditions that I can take something from the zoo market? So the first condition is availability, of course. Availability means there needs to be an offer on the zoo market, because without an offer I can't take something from the zoo market. There are exactly 2 sources that can offer something on the zoo market. The first source is the zoo market itself. So for example, here I could take a male and a female tiger. The other source are meeples or offspring cubes that were given away in the previous leaving phase. So for example, here the total available supply that I could take with the zebras would be 2 females provided by the zoo market and 1 male provided by another player in the leaving phase that was previously performed. So that's availability. The second thing that needs to be fulfilled, that you can take something from the zoo markets, are requirements. All the species here have different requirements. So level 0 species, they have no requirements at all, and they are also not taken in summer, they are taken always in autumn. Therefore we also have this symbol here in the upper left corner. Then we have level 1 species. The level 1 species also have no special requirements, so you can always take from them if they are available. And then we have level 2 and level 3 species. There it's important that these species, they have an animal happiness requirement. So this means the lowest happiness in my zoo needs to be light green or higher. So I'm not allowed to have yellow happy animals in my zoo, because if I have yellow happy animals in my zoo, I can't take from level 2 and 3 species. In addition, some animals have additional requirements that we explained previously in this video. So for example, the Asian elephant and the giant panda have additional requirements, but also all the level 3 species also have these additional requirements that you have to take into consideration when you want to take from this species. It's very important that the panda also is a little bit special because it's an exclusive animal. So only one player in the whole game can take a pair of pandas. And once this is done, and for example, if this would be me, then no more pandas are available. Doesn't matter if there is supply or not, only one player in the whole game can get a pair of pandas. It's very important that to these requirements, there is an exception. So once I have taken something from a level 2 or 3 species and have integrated this into my zoo, this means into my entry quarantine or into my zoo, I can always take from this species. So even if I do not longer fulfill these additional requirements, so for example, my animal happiness is yellow, I still can take gorillas as long as I already have gorillas in my zoo. So besides availability and these additional requirements, there is also one third requirement or condition that needs to be met that you can take something from the zoo market, and this is of course space. You need to have space for these animals that you want to take. So there are also two sources for space. The first source are already existing enclosures. The second one is the entry quarantine. So let's assume it's my first turn and I take from the zebras, I want to take this male and 2 females. Now I would directly place them in my already existing zebra enclosure. And this then directly affects the animal happiness. And this is very important. So now I have 6 zebras. So the zebra, it has now not a yellow happiness, but a light green happiness. It would also, of course, affect the free space, but since this is a very large enclosure, it now still fulfills the dark green happiness, so I can leave it like this. But now it's very important, since now this zebra has a light green happiness and it's the only animal that I have in my zoo, I now can, in my next turn, in the same arrival phase, I can already take from level 2 and 3 species. So let's now assume it's again my turn, and I can want, for example, take a black rhinoceros. So here is a male black rhinoceros that I could take. This is an offspring, and it's very important when I take such an offspring cube, I transform it into a normal meeple. So I don't take offspring cubes, I take always meeples. And it's very important that I take these, and now as you can see I do not have an enclosure that already exists, so then I can place this animal into my entry quarantine. The entry quarantine works like this, that it has space for exactly 2 species. So, and it's important that here you can place an indefinite number of animals. So I could have like 100 rhinoceros here in this entry quarantine. Of course, this will cause some problem for me because this spot will then be blocked forever. But I can have here as many animals as I want, and also any combination. So I could also have here several males, even if rhinoceroses only allow 1 male in my enclosure. It's also important that when I put something in my entry quarantine, I can't directly shift it to the exit quarantine. You only can shift animals from the entry quarantine to the exit quarantine in the leaving phase. Otherwise, they have to stay here and like block a spot for 1 round. And then, so these are the requirements or conditions that needs to be fulfilled. So there needs to be availability. You need to fulfill the requirements of this specific species, and there needs to be space where you can place the species. If you can do that, you are allowed to take something for the zoo market. And of course, you also need to have available zoo market trades. So don't forget, you always have 2 trades available for the leaving and the taking and the incoming phase. If you used all these, then you need to add workers to this specific worker action. And one last small tip we want to give you. So for example, let's say I take from the tigers only the male. And then I would mark here with my cube that I took something here. Or let's assume, yeah, I mean, I took the rhinoceros. So I place also here a cube. Now it's very important that, for example, if someone forgot what I took here from the tiger or here from the rhinoceros, now this person sees, oh, that player yellow has already taken something from the market, and now this player can just ask me, hey, I have forgotten what you took. What did you took? Did you took the female or the male? And then I can tell them. So always when you take something from a species, place a cube there, and if someone has a question, then please answer it. About the arrival phase of the start round. Because in the start round, you entirely skip spring. The reason is easy, you have no animals that can have offspring. So you directly go to the arrival phase of this year. So how does this special arrival phase work? Because since you don't have any species in your zoo, it's impossible for you to have, for example, a light green animal happiness or to fulfill any other additional requirements. So in the first arrival phase, it is possible to start with any species here on the zoo market that is available, except for the giant panda and the Asian elephant. You can start with an Asian elephant and you also can start with a giant panda. So let's say it would be my turn. So I would say I want to start with the snow leopards. So I would take a couple of snow leopards and place them into my entry quarantine. And then it would be the other's turn, and if it's again my turn, I would say I also want Bengal tiger. So I take the Bengal tiger and put it in my entry quarantine. So now my entry quarantine is full and I can't take any more species. So it's not possible to take more than 2 species in your first arrival phase. And now there is a small exception. If you take a level 3 species, which are a little bit special because you can reintroduce them, then you can only start with this level 3 species. So even that you still have a spot available in your entry quarantine, it's not allowed to start with a level 3 species and on top with another species. You get a small advantage out of this. It's you get a nature conservation center for free, which you then can place somewhere on your zoo board. So to summarize, if you start normally, then you can just take any available species except for the giant panda and the Asian elephant. But if you start with a level 3 species, then you can only start with this species but get a free nature conservation center. And now, when the arrival phase of the start round is finished, you go directly to the building phase in autumn and skip all phases between entirely. So now let's talk about clear the market. This is a very fast phase. So the only thing that you do in clear the market, you take away all the animal meeples, offspring cubes and player cubes that are on the animals. And it's very important that you only take the ones that are on the animals and not the ones that are, for example, on a reintroduction program or on a conservation project. So you only take these cubes here and, for example, this raccoon, this male raccoon that nobody took. And that's how clear the market works. And now let's go to autumn. So welcome to autumn. So the first thing you do when you are in autumn, all players receive 3 free enclosure tiles. So you add this to each player's enclosure track. It's very important that in the start round you skip this and go directly to the building phase. So no additional 3 enclosure tiles are handed out in the start phase. So the second thing you do is the player with the highest conservation also gets a free tile on top. And this means that the player that is here on the conservation track, the highest, gets a free enclosure tile. It's very important that it's not just the player that is the highest one, but all the players that are in the same segment, for example, this is a segment from 6 to 10 or from 10 to 15, get such a free enclosure tile. So here in this case, both the red and the yellow one get a free enclosure tile because they are highest on the conservation track. So let's add these to their conservation tracks. And then after this is done, there is also always a tile from a donor. So a free tile from a donor. We differentiate between 4 different types of donors. So we have a savanna donor, a mountain forest one, a rainforest one, and 4 animal welfare donors. The biome donors work like this. So if you are the player with the most savanna species, and this also includes additional animals, then you get a free tile in this round if the savanna donor is faced up. The same with the mountain forest one, but here it's about mountain forest species. Then we have the one with rainforest species as well. With the animal welfare, it's a little bit different because here you have to calculate your animal welfare. The animal welfare is calculated like this, that every yellow species counts as -1 point, every light green species is a 0, and every dark green species is +2. So you calculate your animal welfare with all the animals that you have, and if you have a value that is 0 or higher, you get the free tile from the animal welfare donors. So, and it's important, there is only one donor always faced up, and the others are faced down and will be drawn during the turn of the game. So let's assume in this case the one with the most savanna would be red. So red gets a 5th free enclosure tile. After this is done, you replace the donor. So this means this donor has now done their job, and we draw another donor for the next round. So next round, it's all about animal welfare, and that's of course important information for all the players. After you have done this, so you replace the donor, there are loans. Loans work like this. So for example, let's have a look at the red player. The red player at the moment only has 5 money. So you can only take loans if you have a money track lower than 10. If this is the case, so for example here, you can take a credit and you get 4 money. So for example, if this player would take a credit or a loan, they would now have 5 + 4 = 9. So after this is done, this player places a cube on the loans field that is here on the popularity on the scoring board, and in the end of the game, for each cube that you have here on the loans field, you get -1 popularity point, but not during the game, in the end of the game. It's also important that, for example, let's say I have 8 money. If I now take a credit or a loan, then I only can have in the end a maximum of 10 money. So with loans, in the end, you can never have more than 10 money. So if I would take a loan with 8 money, I would end up with 10 money. And it's also, of course, possible to take several loans. And if you do that, you have to place several cubes on the loans field here. And now let's have a look at the building phase. So let's talk about the building phase. So the building phase consists of many actions that you can do, and it's important that they have no particular order. So all the things I will now mention, what you can do in the building phase, you can do in any particular order. It's also important that building is done simultaneously. This means all players do this together. But of course, if you are, for example, the second player after the starting player and you have something really important to do, then you can also wait with this action until, for example, the starting player has finished. So this is allowed, but most of it is done simultaneously. The general rule when you build here something on the zoo board is you don't have to build adjacent. So for example, if I have here an already existing enclosure, I can also start here with the next enclosure. Or I could build here a building or something. So it's not, you don't have to build adjacent, and it's also important you don't have to look on these paths or streets. You can simply ignore them, that's just decoration. All things that you can do in the building phase, you can also find in the overview cards. So they summarize everything that I now will say, just shorter, of course. So what can you do? So the first thing and the most important thing are, of course, enclosure tiles. Enclosure tiles build your enclosures. So as you noticed before, you got some free tiles. At least you will get 3 free tiles. And these you can now include in your zoo. Of course, it's not a must. You can do it if you want to do it, but they can also stay here on your enclosure track. It's important that you can build with these enclosure tiles. You can build new enclosures, but also expand already existing enclosures. So for example, this would be possible, and then my enclosure track goes down by 1. So then it's also important that if, for example, I'm out of such free tiles, I now have to buy new enclosure tiles. And enclosure tiles, as you can also find it on the overview cards, they cost 7 gold or 7 money per enclosure tile. It's also important that when you buy such an enclosure tile for 7 money, you always get a deed of ownership. This means that you now have the right to build here on the upper row, because this row is blocked. So you have two possibilities to place here something. The first possibility is you spend 5 gold so that you can place here something on one field, or always when you buy an enclosure tile, you get also these deeds of ownership, and now this allows you to build on one of these locked fields. It's important that when you build enclosures, they always have to be placed adjacently. So this is an enclosure, right? So this wouldn't be one. So these are 2 enclosures. That's very important. And of course, you could also place here an enclosure. As long as you don't shift it together, it's not one enclosure. So these would be 2 enclosures. So for example, I could place here a second enclosure and then place on this one an additional animal. And now this is a separate enclosure. But as soon as you shift it together and decide this is one enclosure, then it's an enclosure, of course. It's important that when you place animals in this phase, you place them on top of the enclosure tile. So for example, if I would include these zebras, I place them on top of an enclosure tile. Same with additional animals. Additional animals, you can't just place them in the zoo like this. You place them always on top of enclosure tiles. It's very important that in one enclosure there is only one main species. So for example, it would not be possible to add this rhinoceros here to this zebra enclosure. But what is possible? You can add, of course, an additional species as long as your species, in this case the plain zebra, is tolerant to additional species. And in this case it would be possible. You can also add more additional animals to your enclosure. That's also possible. Additional animals can also stand for themselves. So like this would also be possible. And very important and central is you can have an animal only once. So you can never have like 2 additional animals of the same type. The same with the plain zebra. So you can't have a plain zebra enclosure here and a plain zebra enclosure like here. That's not possible. You always have every species one time and you have it in one enclosure. That's very important. And that's everything for the moment for enclosures. Let's have a look at an example of a new enclosure that we will build now in our zoo here. So we want to build a new enclosure for this rhino. So the first thing that we do is we place enclosure tiles here on our zoo. So these are 3 enclosure tiles. So we go here down by 3. Perfect. And then the first thing you have to do when you place a new species in your zoo, this rhino in this case, we have to check if all the placement rules are respected. These are the rules here on the side. So are there additional animals? Because a rhino doesn't allow them? No. Is there only one male? There is only one female. So great, wonderful. Then the costs, we will have a look at later. And is there one rhino per enclosure tile? Yes, that's also the case. So the placement rules, we checked. Great. Then the next thing we do is we place a cube on the corresponding field on the experience track. Very important, since we already have an ungulate, we can start here on field number 2, because this is our second ungulate. Then we have a look at free space. Does this enclosure meet the minimum requirements? Yes, it does, because we have 2 free enclosure tiles. Then we have a look at the retreats. Do we have enough retreats? No, we don't, so we have to build at least 1. But let's be a little bit better than this. Let's place 2. So these focal points, these retreat focal points, like all the focal points, cost us 2 money each. So this would be 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we just place them each on an enclosure tile. So we also meet this requirement. And then we check, is the group size big enough? The rhino is a loner. So yes, 1 is good enough. So that's perfect. And we really recommend that you do it with the animal cards like we do. So place it on the right or of the left of your zoo board, and always work with your cubes, because then you always directly see how happy your animals are, and you fulfill their minimum requirements. And now it's very important that, of course, we also add the popularity of this new species to our popularity track. So we have here a popularity of 2 from the zebra, and we already have a little bit of buzz. We have 2 buzz because there was offspring, and it was the most popular offspring was from the zebra, because we only have a zebra. So this gave us 2 buzz. And then we also had a bit luck, because there was this event card that gives 3 buzz to the zoo with the most savanna animals. So we already had in the beginning 5 buzz. So now we add our popularity of 3. So that's 3 on top. So then we are at 5, right? And the buzz, of course, is added on top. So the buzz stays always constant. And now on top, because we have now a new enclosure, this also gives us buzz. And it works exactly like with the offspring. So the highest popular new species in your zoo, only main species, no additional species, gives you the base value again as buzz. So we already have 5 buzz. This is our highest popular new species that we have in our zoo. So this gives on top 3 buzz. So in total, we have a total of 8 buzz here. Then what we also have to do is to adjust the costs. Until now, we only had costs of 4. So now the rhino brings in 3 more costs. So now we have costs of 7. And for example, let's now say we are not over, because we still have 2 enclosure pieces. So we also want to add the dama gazelle. We add it here. And so now we have to do exactly the same that we did before. We have to add costs, because it costs 2, perfect. Then we have to add the popularity, so it's 1 more popularity here. And now, very important, since this is a tolerant species to additional animals, and this is not yet a mixed enclosure, but yet it is, so we get 1 additional popularity point. Perfect. And it's very important, if I would now add in my next turn, for example, the meerkat to this enclosure, it only gives me the point of the meerkat, but since this is already a mixed enclosure, I don't get a second time this popularity bonus. And that's the example on how you build a new enclosure. Oh yes, and a small addition to the buzz. Buzz can consist or comes out of 3 sources. So we have event cards. We have always the most popular offspring that adds you buzz. We have the most popular new main species in your zoo. And it's very important that buzz doesn't unlock the Asian elephant and the giant panda. It also doesn't lock commercial buildings, which you can get with a popularity of 10 and higher. And later in winter, as we will see, buzz is always resetted, while the fixed popularity stays here forever. So let's talk about other things that you can build in the building phase, besides enclosure tiles and retreats. So there are 2 more things that you can build. On the one hand, there are buildings. Buildings are placed directly on the zoo board, and we will come to them in a second. The second thing that you can build are focal points, like these. You already know one, the retreat. It's very important that when you place a building, for example, like this souvenir shop, or a focal point, when you build it, it needs to have an effect. So you can never build one of these when it has a 0 effect. The only exception are the retreats. You can build them also on empty enclosures. That's very important. But now let's have a more precise look at these 4 types of focal points. When you buy these, they cost you 2 money. So for example, if we want to buy these 4 houses here, these 4 focal points, then it costs us a total of 8 money, 2 per house. So then we have 2 money left in this case. And it's also important that when you place them, you can always place 1 per enclosure tile. So it's never possible that you have like 2 on an enclosure tile. Every focal point needs its own enclosure. Every focal point needs its own enclosure tile. So what do they have for an effect? First, to the popularity focal point. The popularity focal point is unlocked with group size. So some animals unlock these small yellow focal points with group size. So for example, if I have one rhino, I'm allowed to buy one such yellow focal point. Or for example, if I have 6 or more zebras, I'm allowed to place in this zebra enclosure 2 yellow focal points. So let's do this. So for example, I want to do this, I'm allowed to do this, so I buy one and place it here, and this gives me one more popularity point. The second thing that you can buy are education focal points. When you place them on an enclosure, for example here on the zebra enclosure, you get the whole education that you can find in this enclosure. So we have 0 from the Dama gazelle because it doesn't have education, and we have 2 from the plains zebra. So this would give us a total of 2 education points. It's important then, for example, when you would add a meerkat to this enclosure, it doesn't give you again the mixed enclosure bonus popularity point, but this house would also then activate the education of the meerkat. So this effect, like the effect of buildings and other focal points, is not static. So I would just add one more to my track. So this would then give me a total of 3 education points. Then we have conservation focal points. For conservation focal points, you can only build on enclosures that contain a conservation species. So we have here 2 examples. We have here the Dama gazelle, which has 1 conservation point, and we have here the rhinoceros, which allows us to build up to 3 such focal points. So let's build one here to the rhinoceros, and this would give us 1 more conservation point here on the conservation track. It's important that, of course, I could build here more conservation focal points, but it's also important that, like I said before, you can only place 1 per enclosure tile, and I have at the moment no more space for such a focal point like this one. So, and the last one are the retreats, and you already know them. For each retreat, you can go up on the retreat need on the animal happiness by 1. So let's talk about the buildings in this game. There are 5 types of buildings in this game. There are conservation center, there are parks, then we have education booths, we have food booths, and we have gift shops. It's very important that all the buildings you have in your zoo are unique. This means that you can never have this building with the exact same illustration 2 times. So for example, I can build a second conservation booth, but then it's only allowed when I build the one with the second illustration. So now I can't build a third booth because there is no third illustration. It's also important that every enclosure here in the zoo is only affected by the same type of building only once. So for example, if I would place here my conservation booth, which I will explain in a second, it affects these 2 enclosures. So it's not allowed that, for example, I would build here a conservation booth and it would again use this enclosure for its effect. But you can build it here, that's no problem, as long as it doesn't affect it, as this enclosure doesn't affect it. So I can build it here, but then it's only affected by the red pandas and nothing else. So that's very important, and this counts for all types of building, also education booths or food booths or all the other buildings. So what do we have for different buildings in this game and how do they work? So the conservation center gives you 1 conservation point per enclosure that is adjacent to it and that contains a conservation relevant species, so a species that has conservation. So in this location, it will give you 2 points because the rhino is a conservation species and also the western lowland gorilla. For example, if I would place it here, and here is the tundra swain, and here we have the snow leopard, only one of these 2 species is conservation relevant, so it would only give me 1 point. But in this place here, it gives me 2 points. Then we have the parks. The parks, you can best place them next to another building because parks give you 1 popularity point per adjacent building. So for example, here it would give me 1 point. So I could score 1 popularity point. Of course, it's best if you place it near to as many buildings as possible, so 4 at most. And it's very important that parks give never points to other parks. So you can place them, of course, next to each other, but they don't give each other popularity points. That's very important. Then we have education. So education works like this, that every education booth that we have in the game combines two biomes. So for example, this one combines boreal and rainforest. This one combines savanna and boreal, and this one combines savanna and rainforest. So how does this work? So if I place this one, I need this one. I place it here. So I have here two adjacent savanna enclosures and two adjacent boreal or mountain forest enclosures. And so for each of these, it gives me 2 points. So in total would be 8 points. So I would get 3 I already have, plus 8 gives me 11 education points. It's very important. So this one, like I said, this one combines savanna and mountain forest. And it's important that you only can score a maximum of 4 points with one biome. So for example, if I would have around this particular education booth 4 mountain forest enclosures, it would still only give me 4 points. Or if I would have 4 savanna enclosures around it, it would still give me only 4 points. So you cannot score more than 4 points from the same biome with this particular education booth. And the same is of course true with all the other education booths. And then we have the commercial buildings. So commercial buildings are food booths, as mentioned before, and souvenir shops. And you always have, of one biome, you always have 3 of them. So you have 2 food booths of a biome, and you have 1 souvenir shop or zoo shop of a biome. It's important that you can build them when you have a popularity of 10 or higher. If you don't have a popularity of 10 or higher, it's not allowed for you to build these commercial buildings. But once you have, you can start building these. So how do they work? So they have, like all buildings, they have a price of 5. So all buildings, the food booths, education center, conservation center, and parks cost 5 money. The souvenir shop or zoo shop is a little bit the exception. It costs you 8 money. So let's say I want to build my first mountain forest booth. So this one needs to be placed adjacent to 2 mountain forest biomes. So this here would be the perfect spot. So here I have 2 enclosures that are mountain forest biome, and so I can place it here, and this would reduce my running costs that I have here by 3. So they would go down to 24. The second food booth of a biome has to be adjacent to a 3rd enclosure. So not one of these 2, so this wouldn't be allowed. But for example, here I have a 3rd biome, a 3rd enclosure of the mountain forest biome, so I can place it here. And this would reduce again my costs by 3. It's of course important, both of these would cost 5, so I would not have the money for it. But at the moment, yeah, let's just assume I have the money for it. And then the souvenir shop, once these 2 are built, you can just place it somewhere, and it just needs to be adjacent to a mountain forest enclosure, but it can be the same as the other 2 are adjacent to. So for example, I could place it here. And this then reduces my running costs by 5, so it would go down to 16. And these are all the buildings you can build in Zoo Tycoon, the board game. So besides building buildings and enclosures and focal points, you can also do some construction work in the building phase. The construction work contains 3 different actions. And all of these actions, so for each action that you perform, you have to pay 2 money. Or you have to activate one of your workers, because there is also a staff action that is called construction that does exactly the same. So it just replaces 2 money that you would invest. So what can you do? You can exchange the biome of an empty enclosure. So let's assume, for example, we would not have here snow leopard in this enclosure. Then we could just change the whole biome of it. And this would cost us 2 money. So for exchanging the whole biome of an enclosure. The second thing that you can do, you can move a building to any other place in the zoo. So for example, this park I could move here, and then, because then it gives me like 2 popularity points, or I could also place it here. That wouldn't be possible because there it has no effect, so it needs to still have an effect, so I could move it here. But of course you want to move it somewhere where it makes sense, for example here, and then you adjust its effect, because then it has 1 more popularity point that it scores for you, so you go up by 1. And the last thing you can do, you can move an enclosure tile. It's very important that this enclosure tile stays connected with the enclosure. So for example, it wouldn't be possible for me to move this enclosure tile here, because now it's separate from the black rhinoceros enclosure. But for example, if I would want to place this one here, then this would be possible, because it's still adjacent to the snow leopard enclosure. And that's the 3 possible construction works. What you can also do besides construction work, you can also do staff actions in autumn. And one of them I already mentioned, that's construction work. So there are 2 more potential staff actions that you can do. One is animal keeping. So that's a very simple one, because you can just shift up the experience cube of 1 animal species by 1. And you, of course, you could also hire several workers, because here you again see this icon, so you can do this particular action you can do several times. So I could also move the same cube several times up, so up to 3 times, because you have up to 3 workers that could do that. For example, this is important when you want to have your species faster happy, so you want to increase its happiness level. And the last thing that you could do is this here, and this is very important. This is the only action, the staff action, that you can only do with 1 worker per year. So here you can score a conservation point, or 2 education points, or 1 popularity point. So you can, let's say I would want to do this action here, so then my worker does some conservation action and I get just 1 more conservation point. And these are all the construction works and staff actions that you can do in autumn. So let's talk about winter. In winter, the first thing you do is animal keeping. That's a very fast thing, because you move all the experience cubes on all your animal cards by 1. So once this is done, then it's about education scoring. Education scoring means that the player that is in the lead gets 1 conservation point added to their conservation track. All other players that are in the same segment as this player also get a conservation point. But in this case, only 1 player is in the that is in the lead is in this segment, so only yellow gets a conservation point. And there is also another possibility how you can get points from education, and this is when you step over these printed symbols here during the game. So for example, if I build something in autumn and I step over this popularity point, I get this directly. Here in winter, it's just about conservation points for the leader. Then we have taxes. Taxes means that you lose all your money that is higher than 3. So for example, the player yellow has 5 money left, so you lose 2 money, so you are down to 3 now. And yeah, that's how taxes work. Then we have revenues. Revenues are calculated like this. You take the fixed amount on the side of your segment. So always the boss triangle is decisive, or if you don't have boss, then your fixed popularity. So for example, for player yellow, this player is in this segment, and here we have a fixed amount of 30. For red, this would be the fixed amount, 27. For green, this one, and for blue, it would be 20. To this fixed amount, you add a bonus if you are the first player on the popularity track, or if you are the second one, you also get a bonus. So the first one is yellow, gets a bonus of 4, and the second one, that's red, gets a bonus of 2. So the total revenues of yellow would be 30 plus 4 equals 34, and then you subtract all the running costs, so you have 16, so you get a total of 18 money. So 3 plus 18 equals 21. So then we have to reset the boss. So the boss of this round is then reset completely. So the triangles go down here. And then also the employees go back on their staff fields here. And then it's the new year, so this means the season marker goes here to spring, and the year marker wanders one position. And then you start again in spring, and that's how winter works. So after the 6th and last normal round, the end round follows. In this round, you do the following. The first thing you do is to score all minus popularity points that players gathered in the game. So for example, yellow took 2 loans and therefore gets 2 minus popularity points, 1 for green. The second source of minus popularity points are offspring cubes that you still have in your enclosures and that you didn't transform to normal meeples and that you didn't give away on the animal market. So these 2 offspring cubes now give yellow another 2 minus popularity points. And then we have the elephants here in the exit quarantine. All animals in the exit quarantine also score -1 popularity point. So another 2 minus popularity points. It's important that species in the entry quarantine, they don't give player yellow minus popularity points. The next step that you do in the end round is to score the conservation projects. So let's have a look at them. Let's have a look at the conservation project at the bottom of the zoo market, which we now score from left to right. The 5 projects here on the side are the national park cooperations. How are they scored? So always when during a game a player gathers all the species of a national park cooperation, they can place their cube at the bottom field here, at the top field. So for example, if you are the first one to gather all these species of Wolong National Park, you can place your cube here, and then now you would get 10 points. If you are second, then you place your cube at the bottom position. It's also possible that if 2 players score the exact same national park cooperation in the same year, they both get the points for number 1. So you place both your cubes at the top field, and then nobody can be second in this particular national park. So how would this be scored now? So for example here, both these players scored Pantanal in the same year, so both get 5 points. So 1, 2, 3, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5. The second one here, blue gets again 5 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Green gets 2 points. 1, 2. Then we have Serengeti for yellow, would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we have 4 for red, 1, 2, 3, 4. Ramganga wasn't claimed in this year or in this game, and 10 points for green. So this would be like this. So all these cubes you can now remove. Then we have a look at the Worldwide Conservation Breeding Program, which you already know. So in this case, yellow was the winner and blue scored second. So yellow gets 8 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And blue gets 4 points. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have a look at the Animal Welfare Project. I already explained this a little bit before, but let's have a second look at it. So you first calculate your animal welfare score. This is done that for every dark green happy animal, you get 2 points. For every light green happy animal, you get 0 points. And for every yellow happy animal, you get -1 point. So in this case, this would be 0, 0, 2, 2, 0, -1. So a total of 4 minus 1 equals 3. So let's say player yellow would with this have the highest animal welfare score. Therefore, they would place their cube here on the first place. Let's say green with a score of 2 would be second. Red with a score of 2 would be second. And then the other players, it doesn't matter. So the other players, for example, let's say they have a 0 or a -1. Then they would place their cubes here. And it's important that if you have a 0 or a -1, or then you never can be first or second in this project. You can only be first and second in this project if you have an animal welfare score higher than 0. So with such an animal welfare score, you never get points here. So even if all the players have 0 or -1 or even below, so then nobody would score first or second here. But now let's assume it's like this, and it's important you don't score these points directly. We do this after the last phase of the end round. So we keep the cubes like this. So in the last phase of the end round, now all the players can spend the money that they have remaining here on the money track. This money they can spend on buildings, on focal points, on enclosure tiles, and for buying land. They can no longer perform staff actions, and they can also no longer include animals into their zoo. So nothing is done with the animals, it's just buildings and focal points, enclosure tiles and land that you can buy. And the effects that these new structures have on the conservation track, on the education track, or on the popularity track are scored. It's of course now very important that you have a look at your points, because in the end, the lower of these two, popularity and conservation, will be your victory points. And for example, here, yellow has a lower popularity than it has a conservation. So we have to increase this. So yellow would spend 6 money on 3 more focal points. These focal points we can, for example, place here on the red panda, because we still have one that we can build here. And for the lions, we can also build 2, because we still have 3 enclosure tiles. And also the lion allows us to place 2 yellow focal points when we have 6. So once this is done and we spend all the money, so we only have 1 left, but we can't spend this anymore. So yeah, it's good. Should forget to add, of course, these 3 points to the track. And now once this is done, the animal welfare points come into play, because the animal welfare points that we scored, we get added to the lower of our 2. So for example, yellow got 4 points. So now player yellow can add 4 points to their lower cube. So here it's a very special case, because now we are equal. So we have exactly the same popularity point and conservation after we moved it 1. So now these cubes are moved one after the other. So yellow would move up 1, then green, and now we can choose. So for example, yellow again. Then we score the same for player red. Here it's only popularity that we increase, and the other players, they only have a 0 here, so nothing changes. And now for each player, it is decided which is the lower of the 2. So for example, here it's the green one. Then here for player blue, it's of course the popularity one. Same with player red and player green. And so now these are the victory points of all the players. So in this case, yellow won, red scored 2nd, blue 3rd, and green is on the last place. It's very important that in case that 2 players are equal, both are winners. So there is no tiebreaker, and in this case both yellow and red are the winners of this game. So now the game explanation for the base game is over, and now I want to show you, give you like a brief overview what you find on the last pages of the rulebook. So here you can see on page 20 the 2-player version, so you have to adjust 5 small details, and then this game is also perfectly playable for 2 players. Then here you can also find the introductory game. We recommend it if this is your first game of Zoo Tycoon, the board game. So these are just small changes that you can do that make it easier for you to play the first game. Then here on the next 2 pages we have the event cards, all explained in detail. So this should be quite self-explanatory. Then here, of course, the information, who did the game and who owns the right. And then here the game overview, where you have like the perfect overview. So if you have like very basic questions, what you have to do in which round, this is like the perfect go-to page. And now have a lot of fun with the game. Thanks for watching. Bye.